The town of Bitter Creek squatted in the valley like a dying animal, all dust, desperation, and broken promises. It was the kind of place where lawmen didn't last long and outlaws lasted even less. The saloon at the edge of town, a crooked establishment called the Rusty Nail, was where fortunes changed hands and men settled their differences with lead instead of words. On a Wednesday night in late October, when the desert wind carried the smell of creosote and distant rain, a stranger walked through those swinging doors. Nobody paid much attention at first. Strangers came and went in Bitter Creek like tumbleweeds. This one wore trail dust thick as a second skin, a long black duster that had seen better years, and a hat pulled low enough to shadow most of the face beneath it. Tall, lean, with the kind of stillness that came from spending too many nights alone under an indifferent sky. The stranger moved to the bar with a walk that was neither hurried nor hesitant, just purposeful. Boots hit the warped floorboards with a steady rhythm. "Whiskey," came the voice, low, rough around the edges. Could have been a young man with a hard life, or an old man who'd seen too much. The bartender, a thick-necked former prizefighter named Dutch, poured without comment and slid the glass across the scarred wood. The stranger drank. One swallow, deliberate and slow. Then those eyes, dark as midnight, sharp as broken glass, swept the room. 4 poker tables. 3 were running games. The 4th sat empty, waiting. At the far table, beneath a lamp that cast more shadow than light, sat 5 men locked in a game that had been running since sundown. The pile of money in the center had grown substantial. Voices rose and fell with the rhythm of betting, bluffing, folding. One man was winning, a heavy-set cattle rancher named Morrison, red-faced and loud, who laughed too much and drank too little to be truly drunk. The stranger watched for 3 hands, never moving, never blinking. Then, glass still in hand, crossed the room. "Game open?" The question was directed at no one in particular. Morrison looked up, eyes narrowed with the casual suspicion of a man who'd been cheated before. "Buy-in's $50, cash or gold." The stranger reached into a pocket and placed 5 $10 gold pieces on the table. They landed with soft, definitive clinks. "Name's Hale," the stranger said, pulling out a chair. "Raven Hale." Nobody offered their own names in return. In Bitter Creek, names were currency you didn't spend unless you had to. The game resumed. For the first hour, Raven played conservatively, won a few small pots, lost a couple more, the kind of play that didn't draw attention. The other men relaxed incrementally, the way predators do when they've decided something isn't a threat. They were wrong. By the second hour, Raven's pile had doubled. The plays were subtle. A well-timed raise here, a calculated fold there. Nothing flashy. Nothing that screamed card sharp or con artist. Just steady, methodical winning. Morrison's laughter had died somewhere around the 90-minute mark. Now he watched Raven with the intensity of a man who'd just realized he might lose his ranch. "You're pretty good with cards," Morrison said, his voice carrying an edge that could have cut leather. "Where'd you learn to play like that?" Raven's expression didn't change. "Here and there." "Here and there," Morrison repeated, tasting the words like they'd gone sour. "That's convenient." The other players shifted uncomfortably. The air had changed, gone tight and dangerous the way it does before a thunderstorm. Raven simply dealt the next hand. Smooth, practiced, each card landing exactly where it should. No hesitation, no mistakes. The hand played out. Raven won again. A significant pot this time. Maybe $300. Morrison's chair scraped back with a sound like a knife on stone. "I think you're cheating." The saloon went quiet. Not completely. The piano player in the corner didn't know enough to stop, but quiet enough that everyone nearby could hear what came next. Raven looked up slowly. Those dark eyes met Morrison's without a flicker of fear or anger, just a flat, assessing stare that seemed to catalog every weakness, every tell, every vulnerable point on Morrison's body. "You're entitled to think whatever you want," Raven said softly. "But you're wrong." "Prove it." "I don't have to prove anything. You lost. That's how cards work." Morrison's hand dropped to his hip, where a Colt Peacemaker sat in a worn holster. His fingers didn't quite touch the grip, but the threat was clear enough. "Maybe I want my money back." Raven didn't move. didn't even tense, just sat there with that same unreadable expression, as if Morrison had commented on the weather rather than threatened violence. "You can try," Raven said. The words hung in the air like smoke. Morrison's hand twitched. Not toward his gun, not quite, but enough to show he was thinking about it, weighing odds, calculating risks. Before he could make a decision that would have ended badly for everyone, the saloon doors swung open. 3 men walked in. The first was tall and angular, dressed in black from head to toe, with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite by someone who'd gotten bored halfway through. The second was shorter, stockier, with the thick hands of a man who'd done hard labor most of his life. The third wore a deputy's badge that probably meant nothing out here, but it was the man who walked in behind them who changed everything. Cole Braddock. Even people who'd never met him knew the name, knew the reputation. Outlaw, gunfighter, occasional murderer when the mood struck him. But more than that, he was power in this territory. Not the kind that came from a badge or an election, the kind that came from being willing to do whatever it took and having the skill to back it up. He was maybe 40, with the kind of weathered handsomeness that came from a lifetime outdoors, dirty blonde hair going gray at the temples, eyes the color of winter sky. He moved with the easy confidence of a man who'd never met a situation he couldn't shoot, talk, or buy his way out of. Those winter eyes swept the saloon, cataloging, assessing. They passed over Morrison, over the other players, over Dutch behind the bar. Then they landed on Raven and stopped. Cole smiled. It wasn't a friendly expression. "Well," he said, his voice carrying easily across the room. "Looks like we've got ourselves some entertainment tonight." He walked toward the table with the same easy confidence, pulled out a chair without asking permission, and sat down. "Mind if I join the game?" Nobody minded. When Cole Braddock wanted something, you gave it to him, or you dealt with the consequences. Raven looked at him for a long moment, then pushed the deck across the table. "Your deal." Cole picked up the cards, shuffled them with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent a lot of time in saloons and gambling halls. His hands were steady, calloused, marked with old scars. "I've been hearing stories about you," Cole said conversationally as he dealt. "New player in town. Cleaning out every table you sit at. Nobody knows where you came from or where you're going." "That a problem?" Raven's voice was neutral. "Not a problem, just interesting." Cole arranged his cards, expression giving nothing away. "See, I like to know who's operating in my territory." "Your territory." "My territory," Cole confirmed. "Not aggressive, just stating a fact. Everything from here to the Rio Grande, every saloon, every mine, every cattle operation, all of it flows through me one way or another. I'm just passing through." "Are you?" Cole raised the bet. "Because you've been here 3 days, and in those 3 days, you've won maybe $5,000. That's not passing through. That's setting up shop." Morrison had retreated to the bar, his earlier confrontation forgotten in the presence of someone actually dangerous. The other players had folded and left, sensing that this game had become something else entirely. Now it was just Raven and Cole. The hand played out. Raven won. A small pot, but still a win. Cole didn't seem bothered. He just kept dealing, kept betting, kept talking in that same conversational tone. "You know what I think?" he said. "I think you're good. Really good. I think you could probably clean out every table between here and San Francisco if you wanted to. But I also think you're looking for something." "What would that be?" "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out." They played for 3 more hours. The pile of money shifted back and forth between them like a tide. Cole won some. Raven won more. Neither showed any emotion beyond casual interest. Around midnight, Cole finally pushed back from the table. "I've got business," he said, standing. "But we'll play again, soon." He walked toward the door, then paused and looked back. "Word of advice, Hale. Be careful who you take money from out here. Some people don't like losing. And some people have long memories." Then he was gone, his men following like shadows. Raven sat alone at the table looking at the pile of winnings. Maybe $700 gained tonight. A good haul by any measure. Dutch appeared with another whiskey, set it down without comment. "You know who that was?" he asked. "I know." And you're not worried? Raven picked up the glass, studied the amber liquid in the lamplight. Should I be? Dutch shook his head slowly. Cole Braddock doesn't make threats. He makes observations, and when he observes something, he acts on it. He paused. You might want to think about moving on. Tonight, if you're smart. I'll think about it. But Raven didn't move on. Instead, over the next week, Raven played at every saloon in Bitter Creek and the surrounding towns. The winnings piled up. $12,000, $15,000, $20,000. The money got converted to gold and stashed somewhere safe. And the stories grew. Some said Raven had served in the army, learned cards from soldiers during the war. Others claimed it was a European education, finishing school in mathematics. A few whispered about darker origins, marked cards, sleight of hand, maybe even magic. The truth was simpler and more complicated. Raven had learned cards from necessity. From a childhood spent watching, learning, surviving in the spaces between law and lawlessness. Every tell, every probability, every psychological trick, all of it learned through observation and application. No formal education, no mysterious training, just raw talent honed by years of practice. But with the reputation came attention. Cole's men started appearing wherever Raven played, not threatening, not interfering, just present, watching, taking notes. Then came the day Cole sent an invitation. It arrived via a young boy who couldn't have been more than 12, dressed in clothes too fine for Bitter Creek. He found Raven at the Rusty Nail and delivered a cream-colored envelope with a wax seal. Inside was a card, written in precise copperplate script. Mr. Braddock requests the pleasure of your company for dinner and cards tonight at 8 o'clock. The Braddock Estate, 5 miles west of town. Transportation will be provided. Raven read it twice, then looked at the boy. Tell Mr. Braddock I accept. The boy nodded and disappeared. Dutch, who'd been watching from the bar, came over. That's a mistake, he said flatly. Probably. Cole doesn't invite people to his estate unless he wants something specific. And what he usually wants, Dutch trailed off meaningfully. I can handle myself. Against one man with a gun, sure, maybe even 2 or 3, but Cole's got an army out there. You go to that estate, you might not come back. Raven stood, finished the last of the whiskey. Then I better make it count. The carriage arrived at 7:30. Black lacquer and brass fittings, pulled by 4 matched horses. The driver was one of Cole's men, the angular one in black who'd been in the saloon that first night. He opened the door without speaking. Raven climbed in. The ride took 20 minutes, heading west out of town into the hills where the land got greener and the air smelled like pine instead of dust. The Braddock Estate sat in a valley like something transplanted from back east, a sprawling ranch house with white columns and a wraparound porch, surrounded by outbuildings and corrals. Lights blazed in every window. The carriage stopped in front of the main house. The driver opened the door again, still silent. Raven stepped out. Cole was waiting on the porch, dressed in a clean shirt and vest, looking every inch the respectable rancher rather than the outlaw everyone knew him to be. Glad you could make it, he said, gesturing toward the door. Come on in, dinner's almost ready. The inside of the house matched the outside, expensive, tasteful, completely at odds with the rough country surrounding it. Hardwood floors, real paintings on the walls, furniture that looked like it had been shipped from San Francisco or maybe even further. Cole led the way to a dining room where a table had been set for 2, crystal glasses, silver cutlery, white linen. Sit, Cole said, pulling out a chair. Raven sat. A woman appeared from the kitchen, middle-aged, Mexican, wearing an apron. She placed plates in front of them. Steak, roasted vegetables, fresh bread. Food that would have cost a week's wages in town. Cole poured wine from a bottle that probably cost even more. You're wondering why I invited you here, he said. The thought crossed my mind. I like to know who I'm dealing with, and you, Hale, are interesting. Cole cut into his steak. You show up out of nowhere. You win consistently, but not conspicuously. You don't cheat. I've had people watching, and they're good at spotting cheats. You're just genuinely skilled. That a crime? Not at all. In fact, I respect it. Skill is rare out here. Most people rely on luck or violence. You rely on your brain. He took a bite, chewed thoughtfully. So, Here's what I'm curious about. What's a player like you doing in a nowhere town like Bitter Creek? Raven met his eyes across the table. Like I said, passing through. With $20,000 in winnings. Is that a problem? It could be. See that money? Some of it came from people who pay me a percentage. Some of it came from businesses I have interest in. So in a way, you've been taking money from me. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Raven set down the fork, hands visible on the table. Not threatening, but ready. Cole laughed. Actually laughed. The sound genuine and almost warm. Relax, he said. I'm not going to kill you over a few $1,000s. Hell, I probably lose more than that in a week to bad investments and incompetent partners. He refilled his wine glass. No, I'm more interested in making you an offer. What kind of offer? Work for me. You're clearly talented. I could use someone with your skills. There are games I can't play because everyone knows me. But you? You could go places, win money, gather information. I'd give you a percentage and protection. Protection from what? From people like me. Cole smiled. There are other operators in this territory. Some of them wouldn't take kindly to someone new moving in on their action, but if you're with me, they'd know to leave you alone. Raven considered this. And if I say no? Then you'd be on your own, and that could get dangerous. Sounds like a threat. It's an observation. This territory is controlled. If you're not with someone, you're against everyone. And that's a lonely position to be in. The meal continued in silence for a few minutes. Raven ate slowly, thinking. Finally, I appreciate the offer, but I work alone. Cole nodded like he'd expected that answer. Fair enough. Can't blame a man for trying. He pushed his plate aside. How about we play some cards? Just for the sport of it. They moved to another room, a study lined with bookshelves, dominated by a card table positioned beneath a chandelier. Cole dealt. They played for hours. No money on the table. Just cards, conversation, and the slow assessment of two people trying to measure each other. Cole was good, better than anyone Raven had played in weeks. He knew the mathematics, understood psychology, played with the same calculated aggression that had probably built his empire. But Raven was better. By 2 a.m, if they'd been playing for money, Raven would have been up several $1,000s. Cole leaned back in his chair, studying Raven with those winter sky eyes. You know what I think? He said. I think you're running from something. Or someone. I think you came out here to disappear, and the cards are just how you're funding it. Raven's expression didn't change. That's quite an assumption. Am I wrong? Silence. Cole stood, walked to a cabinet, and pulled out a bottle of actual good whiskey. He poured 2 glasses, slid one across to Raven. I've been in this business a long time, he said. I've met all types. Grifters, killers, thieves, honest men gone wrong. And you know what they all have in common? They're running from something, past crimes, past lives, past versions of themselves they don't want to be anymore. He sipped the whiskey. The question is, what are you running from? Maybe I'm running towards something instead. Like what? Freedom. Cole laughed again, but this time there was something darker in it. Freedom. That's a hell of a word out here. You know what freedom costs in this territory? Blood. Always blood. I've paid that price before. I believe you have. The carriage took Raven back to town just before dawn. The streets were empty, the saloons finally quiet. Raven walked to the small boarding house where a room had been rented for the week, climbed the stairs, locked the door. Only then, in complete privacy, did Raven remove the hat and let down hair that had been pinned up tight beneath it. In the cracked mirror above the wash basin, a woman's face looked back. Sharp features softened slightly without the masculine posture and clothing. Dark eyes just as unreadable as before. Raven Hale had been born Eliza Vance 26 years ago in a place that didn't matter anymore. That girl was dead, had died slowly over the course of years, killed by circumstance and necessity and choices that couldn't be taken back. What remained was something harder, something forged in the kind of fire that didn't leave room for weakness. The binding came off next, the cloth wrapped tight around the chest to flatten and reshape. It hurt to breathe deeply after wearing it all day and night, but the pain was familiar, acceptable. Raven, Eliza, whoever she was now, washed face and hands in cold water from the basin, then sat on the bed and counted money. $22,340 in gold and currency. Enough to disappear, enough to buy a new identity in California or Oregon. Enough to start over, maybe find something resembling a normal life. But that would mean running again. And Raven was tired of running. There was something else now, something that had sparked in that first meeting with Cole Braddock and had been building ever since. Not attraction exactly, not fear either, recognition. Cole was what happened when someone with talent and ambition decided to stop pretending there were rules. He'd built an empire out here by being smarter and more ruthless than everyone else. He'd looked at the chaos of the frontier and decided to control it. And Raven understood that impulse on a level that was almost uncomfortable, because that's what survival had taught. The world didn't care about fairness or justice. It cared about power. And if you wanted to stop being a victim, you had to take power for yourself. Cole had done that, had made himself into something that couldn't be threatened or controlled or destroyed. Raven wanted that too, not his empire, not his specific path, but that same untouchable quality, that same freedom from fear. Outside, the sun was rising over Bitter Creek. Another day in a town that would forget all of this eventually. Forget Raven, forget Cole, forget everything except dust and desperation. But not yet. Raven lay back on the bed, still fully clothed except for the binding, and stared at the ceiling. In 72 hours, Cole Braddock was planning something big. Raven had heard whispers in the saloons, caught fragments of conversation between his men. A job, a score, something worth enough money that even Cole was putting together a careful plan. And Raven was going to find out what it was. Not to join him, not to work for him, to beat him to it. Because that's what this had become. Not about the money anymore, but about proving something. To Cole. To this territory. To the ghost of Eliza Vance who died believing she was helpless. Raven closed her eyes and let exhaustion take over. Tomorrow would bring new games, new opportunities, new risks. But tonight, for just a few hours, there was only sleep and silence and the faint sound of wind rattling the window frame. The woman no one could read dreamed of fire and freedom. And when she woke, she would start planning the impossible. The information came from an unlikely source. 3 days after the dinner at Cole's estate, Raven was playing cards at a smaller establishment on the outskirts of town, a place called the Broken Wheel that catered to miners and drifters who couldn't afford the Rusty Nails prices. The game was low stakes, the players rough, but honest, and Raven was up maybe $40 when a man slid into the empty chair across the table. He was young, maybe 22, with the kind of baby face that made him look even younger. Nervous hands, eyes that darted around the room like a rabbit watching for foxes. "Mind if I sit in?" he asked, voice cracking slightly. Raven gestured to the chips. "Buy-in's $5. The young man counted out coins with trembling fingers. His name, it turned out, was Tommy Reed, and he worked as a clerk in Cole Braddock's operation, keeping books, tracking shipments, handling correspondence that Cole didn't want to deal with personally. He was also terrible at poker. Within an hour, he'd lost everything he'd brought and was sweating through his shirt despite the cool evening air. "I'm out," he said finally, pushing back from the table. Then quieter, almost to himself. "He's going to kill me." Raven looked up. "Who's going to kill you?" Tommy's eyes went wide, like he hadn't meant to say that out loud. "Nobody, nothing. I need to go." He stood too quickly, nearly knocked over his chair. Raven watched him stumble toward the door, then made a decision. Outside, the night was clear and cold. Tommy was halfway down the street, walking fast when Raven caught up. "Hey!" Tommy spun around, hand going to a small pistol at his belt. When he saw Raven, he relaxed slightly, but didn't remove his hand. "What do you want?" "You said someone's going to kill you. Cole?" "I didn't say that." "You implied it." Raven studied him in the moonlight. "You owe him money?" Tommy laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I wish it was that simple. Money I could work off? This..." He shook his head. "I'm dead. I I just don't know when yet. What did you do? For a long moment, Tommy just stood there, clearly weighing options he didn't really have. Then, all at once, the words came pouring out. I was keeping records like always, shipments, payments, who owes what. And I noticed something, money going out that didn't match any of the books. Lots of money, $50,000 over the past 3 months, all going to the same place, Silver Peak, the mining town 2 days north of here. Raven waited. So I asked Cole about it. Just casual, like maybe there was a mistake in the ledgers. And he... Tommy swallowed hard. He looked at me like I was already dead. Told me to forget what I'd seen. Told me that people who ask too many questions don't last long in his organization. But you didn't forget. How could I? $50,000 is more money than this whole operation makes in half a year. So I kept digging. Found out Cole's been buying equipment, mining equipment, surveying tools, explosives. He's planning something big in Silver Peak. A heist, Raven said. Tommy nodded. There's a transport coming through next month, $1 million in jewels from the eastern markets, heading to San Francisco. It passes through Silver Peak because the railroad goes through there. Cole's gonna hit it. And he knows you know. As of this morning, yeah, I was stupid. Left some papers on my desk I should have hidden. One of his men saw them. Tommy's voice dropped to barely a whisper. I've got maybe 2 days before he decides I'm too much of a liability. Maybe less. Raven considered this information, turning it over like a card hand, looking for the angles. Why are you telling me this? Because you're not part of his crew. You're not beholden to him. And because... Tommy hesitated. Because I heard you turn down his offer to work for him. That takes guts. Or stupidity. But either way, you're not afraid of him like everyone else is. That doesn't mean I can help you. Maybe not. But you're smart, and you're good at cards, which means you're good at reading situations. So I'm hoping you can see a way out of this that I can't. Raven looked at this scared young man who'd stumbled into knowledge that was going to get him killed and felt something unfamiliar stir. Not quite sympathy, that emotion had been burned out years ago, but something adjacent to it. Recognition, maybe. Of what it felt like to be trapped with no good options. Where are you staying? Boarding house on 3rd Street, room 12. Pack your things. Be ready to leave town before sunrise. Tommy's eyes widened. You're helping me? I'm giving you advice. What you do with it is your business. Raven turned to walk away, then paused. And Tommy? Don't go back to that boarding house tonight. Cole's men are probably already watching it. Find somewhere else. Somewhere they won't think to look. Where? Raven thought for a moment. The church. Nobody ever goes there after dark, and it'll be unlocked. Hide in the choir loft until morning, then run. Tommy nodded, relief and terror warring on his young face. Thank you. Thank you. But Raven was already walking away, mind already moving past Tommy Reed's problems to the larger implications of what he'd revealed. $1 million heist. Cole Braddock's biggest score yet. And somehow, impossibly, Raven now had advanced knowledge of it. The smart move would be to do exactly nothing. Take the $22,000 already won, leave Bitter Creek tonight, and never look back. Let Cole have his heist. Let Tommy run or die. None of it was Raven's concern. But the smart move wasn't always the right move. And lately, Raven had been thinking less about survival and more about something harder to define. Something that felt like taking control instead of just reacting. Cole Braddock had built his empire by being smarter and more ruthless than everyone else. He controlled the territory because everyone else was too afraid or too weak to challenge him. What would happen if someone did challenge him? Not with violence, Cole had too many guns for that to work, but with the same tools he used. Intelligence, planning, precision. What would happen if someone beat him at his own game? Back at the boarding house, Raven climbed the stairs quietly and locked the door. The room was exactly as it had been left, sparse, functional, temporary. But now it felt different, like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing the jump was inevitable but not yet sure of the landing. Raven lit the oil lamp and pulled out paper and pencil from the saddlebag that held everything that mattered. Then, for the next 4 hours, worked out the mathematics of impossibility. Silver Peak was 2 days north by horse, 3 by wagon. A mining town that had boomed 5 years ago and was now in slow decline as the silver deposits ran thin. Population maybe 300, most of them miners or the people who serviced miners. One main street, one bank, one sheriff who was probably on Cole's payroll like everyone else in the region. The jewel transport would come through on the railroad, which meant it would stop at Silver Peak Station to take on water and supplies. Standard procedure. The railroad hired guards, usually former soldiers or lawmen, but they were spread thin across multiple cars. The jewels themselves would be in a secure car, locked and under constant watch. Cole's plan, based on what Tommy had described, was probably straightforward. Hit the transport during the stop, overwhelm the guards with superior numbers, crack the secure car, take the jewels, and disappear into the hills before reinforcements could arrive. It was a good plan. Simple, direct, with enough contingencies to handle most variables. But it had weaknesses. First, it relied on speed and violence. That meant a lot of people would know about it afterward. Witnesses, survivors, people who could identify Cole's men, describe their methods, trace them back to Bitter Creek. Second, it assumed the guards would react predictably. Former soldiers usually did. They'd fight until they realized they were outgunned, then surrender. But sometimes you got a hero who decided dying was preferable to losing the cargo. That could complicate things. Third, and most important, it focused all the attention on the transport itself, on the train, on the moment of transfer, which meant nobody would be watching the bank. Raven set down the pencil and stared at the rough sketch that had emerged on the paper. Silver Peak's Main Street, the bank at one end, the train station at the other. A straight line maybe half a mile long. The jewels would be in the secure car for maybe 20 minutes while the train took on water. That was Cole's window. But what if there was another window? What if the jewels never made it to the bank's vault because they were gone before the bank even knew to expect them? It was insane. Impossible. The kind of plan that required perfect timing, inside information, and a crew capable of executing without mistakes. Raven didn't have a crew. Didn't have inside information beyond what Tommy had provided. Didn't have anything except skill with cards and a growing certainty that this was the only move that mattered. But impossible didn't mean it couldn't be done. Just that nobody had tried it before. The lamp burned low as dawn approached. Raven finally lay back on the bed, fully clothed as always, and let exhaustion take over for a few hours. When consciousness returned, the sun was already up and voices were drifting through the thin walls from the street below. Loud voices. Angry voices. Raven moved to the window and looked down. A crowd had gathered in front of the sheriff's office. Maybe 30 people, all talking at once. In the center of the crowd, visible through gaps in the bodies, was Cole Braddock. He was holding something, a piece of paper, and his expression was cold enough to freeze water. Raven couldn't hear the words but didn't need to. The message was clear enough. Someone had crossed Cole, and now there would be consequences. 15 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. Raven opened it to find one of Cole's men, the stocky one with thick hands, standing in the hallway. "Mr. Braddock wants to see you," he said. Not a request. "When?" "Now." They walked through town in silence. People on the street watched them pass, then quickly looked away. By now, everyone had heard something. Rumors were probably flying like bullets. Cole was waiting in his office above the rusty nail, a room Raven had never seen before. It was larger than expected, dominated by a massive desk made from dark wood that probably weighed more than a horse. Maps covered one wall, ledgers lined the shelves. A safe sat in the corner, door closed and locked. Cole stood by the window looking down at the street. He didn't turn when Raven entered. "Tommy Reed is dead," he said conversationally. "Found him this morning in an alley with his throat cut. Terrible thing. He was a good clerk." Raven said nothing. Cole finally turned. His winter sky eyes were unreadable. "He talked to you last night. At the Broken Wheel, then outside afterward. My men saw you. He lost money at cards. We talked for maybe 2 minutes." "About what?" "He said he was in trouble. I told him to leave town." "Did he mention why he was in trouble?" This was the moment. The point where truth or lie would determine everything that came next. Raven could feel the weight of it, heavy as that desk. "No," Raven said. "He didn't get specific. Just said someone was going to kill him. Seemed scared enough that I believed him." Cole studied Raven's face for a long moment, looking for tells, for cracks, for any sign of deception. But Raven's expression remained exactly what it had always been, unreadable. Finally, Cole smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. You're either telling the truth, or you're the best liar I've ever met. And I've met some exceptional liars. He moved to the desk, poured whiskey from a crystal decanter. Tommy was stealing from me. Not money, information. He knew about a business venture I've been planning, a significant venture, and he was going to sell that information to my competitors. So you killed him. I had him killed. There's a difference. Cole took a drink. Out here, you protect what's yours. You let one person steal from you, everyone else thinks they can do the same. It's about maintaining order. Order? Raven repeated. You don't approve. Not my business to approve or disapprove. You run this territory however you want. Cole laughed, and this time there was genuine amusement in it. You know what I like about you, Hale? You don't pretend to be something you're not. Half the people in this town play at being good, moral, upstanding citizens. But you're honest about what you are. And what am I? A survivor. Just like me. Cole refilled his glass. Which is why I'm going to make you another offer. A better one than before. I told you, I work alone. Hear me out first. The venture Tommy knew about, it's happening in 3 weeks, and it's going to require the best people I can find. Not just gunfighters. I've got plenty of those. I need someone smart, someone who can think on their feet and adapt when things go wrong. He paused. Someone like you. What's the job? Can't tell you unless you're in, but I can tell you the split. 20% of whatever we take, and we're taking a lot. Raven did the math instantly. If the haul was really $1 million, 20% was $200,000. More money than most people saw in a lifetime. That's generous, Raven said carefully. I'm generous when people are useful to me, and I think you could be very useful. Cole set down his glass. So what do you say? Are you in? I need details. Can't make a decision without knowing what I'm signing up for. Fair enough. Come to my estate tonight, 8 o'clock, like before. I'll explain everything then. But Hale? Cole's voice went hard. If you hear what I have to say and then decline, we're going to have a problem, because at that point you'll know too much, just like Tommy did. You understand what I'm saying? I understand. Good. I'll see you tonight. The dismissal was clear. Raven walked out of the office, down the stairs, back into the street where the sun beat down like a physical weight. 3 weeks until Cole's heist. 3 weeks to plan something impossible. But first, Raven needed a crew. The problem was that a crew required trust, and trust was something Raven had never been good at. Every person was a potential betrayer, every alliance temporary. That's what experience had taught, what survival had demanded. But this job couldn't be done alone. The variables were too complex, the timing too precise. Raven needed at least 3 other people. 4 would be better, and they had to be good. Skilled enough to pull off a job that would make Cole Braddock's heist look like amateur work. The first recruit came from an unexpected place. 2 days later, Raven was playing cards at a saloon in a neighboring town called Redemption, a place even smaller and more desperate than Bitter Creek. The game was forgettable, the players drunk and loud. Raven was about to leave when a woman sat down at the table. She was maybe 35, with the kind of weathered beauty that came from hard living. Dark hair pulled back tight, hands scarred from labor. But her eyes were sharp, calculating, and when she looked at Raven, there was recognition there, not of identity, of type. Name's Clara, she said, buying in with gold coins. You're Raven Hale. Word travels. It does when you're winning like you have been. Clara arranged her cards with practiced ease. I heard you cleaned out every table in Bitter Creek. That takes skill. Or cheating. I'm betting on skill. They played for an hour. Clara was good. Not as good as Raven, but competent enough to make it interesting. She won some hands, lost others, and never showed frustration or overconfidence. When the game broke up, she followed Raven outside. I need to talk to you, Clara said. About what? About a job. Or more specifically, about you looking for people for a job. Raven stopped walking. What makes you think I'm looking for people? Because I know Cole Braddock is planning something big, And I know you've been asking subtle questions around town about who's good with explosives, who can crack a safe, who's reliable under pressure. You're recruiting. Clara lit a cigarette, the match flaring in the darkness. And I want in. You don't even know what the job is. Don't care? Whatever it is, it's better than what I've got now, which is nothing. She exhaled smoke. I can pick any lock made. I can crack a safe in under 5 minutes. And I've pulled jobs from here to Denver without getting caught. That useful enough for you? Why should I trust you? You shouldn't. Trust is for fools. But you can use me, and I can use you. That's better than trust. Raven studied her. Clara stood there smoking, completely relaxed, like this was a business negotiation rather than a conversation that could end with violence. Tell me about the Denver job, Raven said. Clara smiled. Bank vault. 4 men, including me. We got in through the roof, cracked the safe while the town slept, and were 50 miles away before they even knew they'd been robbed. Walked away with $30,000 each. What happened to your crew? 2 of them died in a shootout 6 months later. Unrelated business. The third one drank himself to death in a San Francisco gutter. That's how it goes out here. People don't last. And you think you will? I think I'm smart enough to know when an opportunity presents itself. Clara dropped the cigarette and ground it under her heel. So, am I in or not? Raven made the decision the way all decisions were made lately, by instinct and calculation in equal measure. You're in, but there are rules. You do exactly what I say when I say it. No improvising, no heroics, and if this goes bad, you run. Don't try to save anyone. Don't try to fight. Just run. Fair enough. When do we start? Meet me in Silver Peak in 2 weeks. There's a boarding house on the east side of town called the Silver Star. Get a room and wait for contact. Clara nodded and walked away without another word. 1 down, 3 to go. The second recruit was a demolitions expert named Jack McBride, found working in a mining camp outside of Redemption. He was 50 if he was a day, with hands missing 2 fingers and a face marked by old burns. But when Raven mentioned needing someone who could handle explosives, the mine foreman had pointed at Jack without hesitation. Best blaster in 3 territories, the foreman said. Crazy, but good. Jack was indeed crazy. He talked to his explosives like they were people, gave them names, treated them with the kind of reverence most people reserved for sacred things. But he knew his craft, could calculate powder charges in his head, could time a fuse to the second, could bring down a wall or crack a vault with surgical precision. What's the job? Jack asked when Raven approached him. Can't say yet, but it involves opening something that's designed not to be opened. Jack grinned, showing teeth stained brown from tobacco. Those are my favorite kind of jobs. It's dangerous. Living is dangerous. At least this way I get paid for it. The third recruit was harder to find. Raven needed someone who could handle horses and wagons, who knew the terrain between Silver Peak and the border, who could drive fast under pressure. After a week of asking around, the name that kept coming up was Samuel Sam Cross. Sam turned out to be a freighter, one of the people who hauled goods between towns in wagons pulled by teams of horses or mules. He was young, maybe 24, built like someone who'd spent his whole life doing physical labor. But more importantly, he was known for getting his cargo through on time, regardless of weather, bandits, or terrain. I heard you're the best driver in the territory, Raven said, finding him outside a freight office in a town called Liberty. Sam looked up from the harness he was mending. I'm good. Don't know about best. I need someone who can get from Silver Peak to the Mexican border in under 36 hours. Can you do that? Depends on the load and the weather, but yeah, probably. The load will be light, 4 people and some cargo. The weather is what it is, and there will be people chasing us. Sam set down the harness. This is an outlaw job. Does that bother you? Depends on what we're stealing and who we're stealing it from. Jewels. From people who already stole them from someone else. Sam considered this. What's the pay? $25,000 each. His eyes widened slightly. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of risk. I've got a sister. She's sick. Needs medicine we can't afford. $25,000 would cover that, and then some. Sam stood. I'm in. But if we get caught, I'm saying you forced me. Fair enough. 3 recruits. It would have to be enough. That night, Raven went to Cole's estate for the second time. The dinner was less formal this time. Cole laid out his plan with the confidence of someone who'd thought through every angle. The train, the timing, the guards, the extraction route. It was good work. Professional. Exactly the kind of operation that had kept him on top for years. "So that's it," Cole said when he'd finished. "Simple, direct, effective. We hit them when they're vulnerable, take what we want, and disappear before they can react." Raven nodded slowly. "It's a good plan. But it's loud. A lot of witnesses, a lot of attention. The law will come down hard after something like this. Let them come. By the time they figure out who did it, we'll be in Mexico. Maybe. Or maybe one of your men talks. Or maybe a witness identifies someone. Or maybe the railroad brings in Pinkertons who actually know what they're doing." Cole leaned back in his chair. "You have a better idea?" This was the moment. The edge of the cliff. Raven met his eyes. "I do. But you're not going to like it. Try me. Your plan focuses on the transport, on overwhelming force at the point of transfer, but that means everyone sees you coming. Guards, railroad workers, townspeople. Even if you succeed, you've shown your hand. And your plan, nobody sees us. We're ghosts. We take the jewels before anyone even knows they're vulnerable, and we're gone before the alarm is raised." Cole looked interested despite himself. "How?" "The bank in Silver Peak. The jewels will be stored there overnight before the train continues to San Francisco. We hit the bank, not the train. The bank will be guarded. 1 sheriff and maybe a deputy. Against 4 skilled people? We can handle that. And how do we get in? The vault will be locked. We go through the roof, drop down, crack the safe, take what we want, and leave the same way. No witnesses. No violence unless absolutely necessary." Cole was silent for a long moment, turning it over in his mind. Finally, "It's insane. It's cleaner than your plan. My plan uses overwhelming force. Yours uses what? Hope that everything goes perfectly? Yours hopes the same thing, but mine has fewer variables, fewer people who can talk, fewer opportunities for things to go wrong. And if things do go wrong, then we improvise, just like you would." Cole stood and poured whiskey for both of them. When he handed Raven a glass, his expression was thoughtful. "You've got guts, I'll give you that. Coming in here and telling me my plan isn't good enough." He drank. "But here's the problem. I've been working on this for months. I've got people positioned, equipment ready, escape routes planned, and you want me to throw all that away for a plan you came up with in what, a week? I want you to consider that there might be a better way." "Better for who? You?" "Better for everyone who wants to walk away from this alive and rich." They stared at each other across the desk. 2 predators, 2 survivors, 2 people who'd made themselves into something harder than the world that tried to break them. Cole laughed suddenly. "You know what? Fine. I'll make you a deal. You pull off your version of the heist with your crew. I'll pull off mine. Whoever gets the jewels first wins." Raven hadn't expected that. "You're serious?" "Completely. I like competition. Keeps me sharp. And honestly, I'm curious to see if you can actually do it." Cole raised his glass. 3 weeks from now, we'll both be in Silver Peak. May the best thief win." They drank to it, and Raven walked out of that estate knowing that the impossible had just become inevitable. 3 weeks to plan a heist that would make history. 3 weeks to beat Cole Braddock at his own game. 3 weeks to prove that the woman no one could read was the most dangerous player on the board. The clock was ticking. The ride to Silver Peak took 2 days through country that got progressively more hostile with each mile. The green hills around Bitter Creek gave way to scrubland, then to desert broken only by occasional rock formations that looked like the bones of some ancient beast. The sun beat down merciless and constant, and at night the temperature dropped so fast that breath came out in clouds. Raven made the journey alone, keeping to less traveled routes, stopping only when the horse needed rest. The animal was a dun mare, bought specifically for this job. Sturdy, reliable, with enough stamina to cover distance without complaint. Not beautiful, not spirited, just functional. Like everything else Raven had chosen lately. The crew would arrive separately over the next few days, coming from different directions, staying in different boarding houses. The less they were seen together before the job, the better. The less anyone could connect them afterward, the better still. Silver Peak appeared on the horizon late in the afternoon of the second day, exactly as described, a mining town clinging to the side of a mountain like it wasn't sure whether to grow or die. Buildings in various states of construction and decay, mine shafts dotting the hillside like wounds, the railroad tracks cutting through the center of town, the station sitting at one end like a promise that somewhere else existed beyond this place. And at the other end, the bank. It was a 2-story brick building, newer than most of the structures around it, built solid with barred windows and a heavy door. The kind of building meant to project security, to tell people their money was safe here, even though everyone knew that safety was an illusion. Everything could be taken if someone wanted it badly enough. Raven rode past slowly, cataloging details. The bank closed at 5. 2 guards visible during business hours, one inside, one outside. The sheriff's office was 3 buildings down, close enough to respond to trouble, but not close enough to prevent it. Good. The distance mattered. The Silver Star boarding house was on the east side of town, just like Raven had told Clara. It was a shabby 2-story structure that had probably been white once, but had faded to the color of old bone. A sign hung crooked over the door, creaking in the wind. The proprietor was a wizened woman who looked like she'd been old when the town was young. She took Raven's money without comment and handed over a key. Room 7. Upstairs, end of the hall. Breakfast is at 6 if you want it. Don't make noise after 9. The room was small, containing a bed that sagged in the middle, a washstand with a cracked basin, and a window that overlooked the back alley. Perfect. Privacy mattered more than comfort. Raven unpacked the essentials: spare ammunition, the detailed drawings of Silver Peak's layout made from memory and description, a pocket watch accurate to the second, then settled in to wait. Clara arrived the next morning, checking in under a different name, taking a room 2 doors down. They didn't acknowledge each other in the hallway, just strangers sharing a boarding house. Jack McBride showed up that afternoon, smelling like sulfur and whiskey, carrying a worn canvas bag that probably contained enough explosives to level half the town. He took a room on the first floor, away from everyone else. Smart. If something in that bag decided to detonate, at least the casualties would be limited. Sam Cross was the last to arrive, pulling up 3 days before the job in a freight wagon that looked like it had survived several wars. He didn't stay at the Silver Star, instead bedding down at the livery stable with his horses. "I trust animals more than people," he'd explained. Hard to argue with that. Once everyone was in position, Raven called the first meeting. It happened in a dried-up creek bed 2 miles outside of town, just after sunset when the light was failing, but darkness hadn't completely taken hold. The kind of place where 5 people could talk without being overheard or observed. They gathered in a rough circle, these strangers bound together by greed and desperation, and the slim possibility that this might actually work. "Everyone knows why we're here," Raven began without preamble. "But before we go any further, I need to make something clear. This job is dangerous. The likelihood of us all walking away alive is maybe 60%. The likelihood of us getting caught is higher. If any of you want to leave now, there's no shame in it." Nobody moved. "Good. Then let's talk about what we're doing and how we're doing it." Raven unrolled the drawings of Silver Peak onto a flat rock, weighting down the corners with stones. "The jewels arrive on the midnight train in 2 days. They'll be transported under guard to the bank and locked in the vault until the next morning, when they'll be loaded back on the train and continue to San Francisco." Clara leaned forward, studying the layout. "Cole Braddock is planning to hit the train. Everyone knows that." "Let him. We're not interested in the train. We're interested in the 5 hours between when the jewels go into the vault and when Cole makes his move." Jack whistled low. "You want to rob the bank while Braddock robs the train? That's either genius or suicide." "It's both," Raven admitted. "But here's the advantage. All eyes will be on Cole. The guards, the law, everyone. They'll be expecting an attack on the transport. They won't be watching the bank because they'll think the threat is somewhere else." "Except the bank will still be locked and guarded," Sam pointed out. "That's where Clara comes in." Raven looked at her. "Can you crack the vault?" Clara pulled out a small leather case from her coat, opened it to reveal a collection of tools that looked like surgical instruments. I've cracked bigger, but I'll need time. Maybe 20 minutes, depending on the mechanism. You'll have it. Jack, your insurance. If Clara can't get the vault open, we use explosives. Can you crack it without bringing down the building? Jack rubbed his scarred hands together. I can crack anything. Question is how loud you want it. As quiet as possible. We're trying to be ghosts. Ghosts with explosives. Got it. Sam, you're our exit strategy. You'll have the wagon positioned in the alley behind the bank. We load the jewels, you get us to the border. 36 hours, no stops except to change horses. Sam nodded slowly. That's pushing it, but yeah, I can do it. What about the guards? We go through the roof, drop down inside after the bank closes, when there's only one guard doing rounds. We subdue him quietly, get what we need, and leave the same way we came in. And if Cole's men show up early? Clara asked. Then we improvise. But the timeline works in our favor. Cole thinks he's competing with us. He doesn't know we're planning to hit the bank while he's busy elsewhere. By the time he realizes what happened, we'll be gone. They spent the next hour going over every detail, every contingency, every possible thing that could go wrong, and how to handle it. Raven had learned a long time ago that good planning was the difference between success and a shallow grave. When the meeting broke up, they dispersed in different directions, returning to town separately. The less they were seen together, the better. Back in the boarding house room, Raven stood at the window watching the street below. Silver Peak was settling in for the night, lights winking on in windows, people heading home or to the saloons to drink away the day's disappointments. Somewhere out there, Cole Braddock was making his own preparations, positioning his men, checking weapons, going over his timeline. He thought this was a competition, a game between equals. What he didn't understand yet was that Raven wasn't playing the same game. This wasn't about proving anything to Cole or taking what was his. This was about something larger, about showing that the rules everyone else followed, the rules that said power came from violence and dominance, weren't the only rules that mattered. Intelligence could beat force, precision could beat chaos, and a woman everyone underestimated could beat the most dangerous man in the territory. The next day, Raven spent hours studying the bank from various angles, memorizing patrol patterns, timing the guards' movements. The external guard changed position every hour, walking a circuit around the building. The internal guard was visible through the front windows during business hours, an older man with a rifle who looked more bored than alert. At night, only one guard remained. He did rounds every 2 hours, checking doors and windows, then returning to a chair near the vault where he could doze without being completely derelict in his duty. 2 hours was plenty of time, more than enough to get in, crack the vault, take what they needed, and disappear. The second reconnaissance came that night, after the town had gone to sleep. Raven moved through the darkness like a shadow, checking the roof of the bank, testing the structural integrity, finding the weak point where entry would be easiest. The roof was flat, covered in tar paper that had seen better years. A skylight sat in the center, locked from the inside but accessible if you knew what you were doing. Clara would handle that. She'd handle all the locks. Getting to the roof would require climbing the adjacent building, crossing a gap of maybe 8 feet, then dropping down. Difficult, but not impossible. Raven had done harder climbs in worse conditions. On the way back to the boarding house, a voice called out from an alley. "Little late for a stroll, isn't it?" Raven's hand went to the pistol beneath the coat, but stopped when a familiar figure stepped into the moonlight. Cole Braddock, looking entirely too pleased with himself. "What are you doing here?" Raven asked. "Could ask you the same question, but I already know the answer. You're scouting, getting ready for your big heist." Cole leaned against the wall, completely relaxed. "How's the planning going?" "Fine." "Good, good. Mine's going well, too. Got 20 men positioned around town, weapons cached, escape routes planned. Should be quite a show when the train comes through." "I thought the plan was to hit it at the station." "Plans change. I decided to hit it a mile outside of town instead. Less civilians in the way, more room to maneuver. Plus, it keeps your crew from getting caught in the crossfire when you try your roof trick." So he knew. Of course he knew. Cole didn't stay on top by being ignorant. "How long have you known?" Raven asked. "About your plan?" "Since the beginning. You think I couldn't figure out what you were doing when you started recruiting a safe cracker and a demolitions expert? Please. I've been doing this a lot longer than you have. And you're just going to let me try anyway. Why not? I like the competition, and honestly, if you actually pull it off, I'll be impressed. Hell, I might even let you keep half the take. Generous of you. Cole pushed off from the wall, walked closer. In the moonlight, his face looked younger, less weathered. Or maybe that was just tricks of shadow and light. You remind me of someone, he said quietly. Someone I used to know a long time ago. Someone who thought they could change the rules just by being smart enough, tough enough, ruthless enough. What happened to them? They died. Because being smart isn't enough out here. You need luck too, and allies, and the willingness to do whatever it takes when things go wrong. I have all those things. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you've got a crew you barely know, a plan that requires perfect timing, and a competitor who could decide at any moment to just kill you all and take the jewels himself. Raven met his eyes. You won't do that. Why not? Because you meant what you said. You want the competition. You want to see if I can actually do it. And killing me now would rob you of that satisfaction. Cole laughed, genuine and loud enough to echo off the buildings. You're absolutely right, which makes you either very smart or very stupid. Haven't decided which yet. He walked past her, heading toward wherever he was staying, then paused. One more thing. When this is over, whether you succeed or fail, we're going to have a conversation about what comes next, because talent like yours doesn't come along often, and I'd hate to see it wasted. Then he was gone, disappearing into the darkness like he'd never been there at all. Raven stood alone in the street, processing that encounter. Cole wasn't threatened by this competition. He was entertained by it, which meant he either didn't think Raven could succeed or he didn't care if Raven did. Both possibilities were dangerous in different ways. Back in the room, sleep wouldn't come. Too much adrenaline, too many variables running through the mind. So Raven sat by the window and watched the stars wheel overhead, counting hours until everything changed. The day before the heist, Raven called a final meeting with the crew. Same place, same dried creek bed. But this time the atmosphere was different. Tense, charged with the knowledge that tomorrow they'd either be rich or dead. Last chance to walk away, Raven said. Again, nobody moved. Then we go over it one more time. Clara, your point on entry. You get us through the skylight and down into the bank. How long? 3 minutes for the skylight, another 2 to rig the rope descent. 5 minutes total. Jack, once we're inside, you stand watch while Clara works on the vault. If anything goes wrong, if guards show up early, if Cole's men decide to crash the party, you handle it. Jack patted the revolver on his hip. I handle it permanent. No killing unless absolutely necessary. We're thieves, not murderers. Dead guards mean hangings if we're caught. Fine, I'll just shoot them a little bit. Sam, you're in the alley at midnight. Wagon ready, horses fresh. We come out that back door, we load fast, and we move. Understood? Sam nodded. Understood. I've got relay stations set up every 50 miles between here and the border. We'll have fresh horses waiting. Should cut the travel time down to 28 hours if we push hard. We push hard. Raven looked at each of them in turn. This is it. Tomorrow night we become either legends or corpses. Make sure you know which one you're aiming for. They dispersed again, melting into the landscape. Raven stood alone in the creek bed, feeling the weight of what was coming. Not fear exactly, something else. The same feeling that came before a big poker hand when everything rode on the next card. That night, Cole showed up at the boarding house. He knocked on the door like a civilized person instead of kicking it in like Raven half expected. When the door opened, he was standing there with a bottle of expensive whiskey and 2 glasses. Thought we should have a drink before tomorrow, he said. One way or another, things are about to get interesting. Raven stepped aside, let him in. They sat across from each other at the small table, and Cole poured generous measures. To worthy opponents, he said, raising his glass. They drank. Can I ask you something? Cole said after a moment. Why are you really doing this? The money. Bullshit. You could have left Bitter Creek weeks ago with what you'd won. Could have gone anywhere, started fresh. But you stayed. You took this insane risk. That's not about money. Raven was silent for a long moment, considering how much truth to give him. You said I remind you of someone. Well, you remind me of someone too. or not someone specific, just a type. The kind of person who takes what they want because they can, who builds power through fear and force. And you don't approve. I don't care about approval, but I wanted to see if there was another way, if someone could beat that system without becoming part of it. Cole swirled the whiskey in his glass. That's naive. Power is power. Doesn't matter how you get it. Maybe, or maybe proving I can beat you at your own game is its own kind of power. And if you fail, then I fail, but at least I tried something that mattered. They drank in silence for a while, two people on opposite sides of a line that neither had drawn but both accepted. You know what's funny? Cole said eventually. I think I would have liked you if we'd met under different circumstances. We're more alike than you want to admit. We're nothing alike. Keep telling yourself that. He stood, left the bottle. Good luck tomorrow, Hale. You're going to need it. After he left, Raven sat alone with the remaining whiskey and thought about what he'd said, about similarity and difference, and the space between them. The truth was more complicated than either of them wanted to acknowledge. They were both survivors, both willing to take risks that would kill most people, both operating outside the law because the law had never done anything for them. But Cole had chosen dominance, had decided that the only way to be safe was to make everyone else afraid. Raven had chosen something else, something that didn't have a name yet but felt like freedom. Tomorrow would determine which approach worked better. The hours crawled past like wounded animals. Midnight came and went. Dawn arrived too early and too bright. The day stretched out interminable and suffocating. Raven spent it checking equipment, going over the plan, forcing down food that tasted like ash. The crew stayed separate, invisible, waiting for night. At 6 p.m, Raven watched the bank close. The guards changed shift. The town settled into its evening rhythm. At 10, the streets began to empty. At 11, Raven left the boarding house dressed in black, face obscured by a dark scarf, moving through shadows toward the rendezvous point. The others were already there, gathered in the alley behind the building adjacent to the bank. Clara with her tools, Jack with his weapons and a small satchel of explosives, Sam 2 blocks over with the wagon, waiting. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. At 11:45, they began the climb. The adjacent building was a hotel, 3 stories tall with a fire escape that made the ascent almost too easy. They climbed in single file, boots finding purchase on iron rungs, hands gripping cold metal. The roof was exactly as Raven had scouted it, flat, solid, with the bank's roof visible across the gap. 8 feet of empty air between safety and the next phase. Clara went first, taking a running start and launching herself across the gap. She landed in a crouch, absorbed the impact, turned and gave a thumbs up. Jack went next, heavier and less graceful but making it across. Raven came last, the jump feeling longer in execution than it had looked in planning. There was a moment of suspension, of weightlessness, where falling seemed more likely than landing. Then boots hit tar paper and the moment passed. They moved to the skylight. Clara pulled out her tools and went to work on the lock, while Raven and Jack stood watch. The town was quiet below. Most people were asleep or in the saloons. The guard inside the bank would be doing his rounds right about now, checking the first floor. Clara's tools made soft clicking sounds as she worked the mechanism. 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, then a soft pop as the lock gave way. She eased the skylight open, revealing darkness below. Jack pulled out a coiled rope, secured one end to a vent pipe, tested the weight. "We're good," he whispered. They went down one at a time, Clara first, disappearing into the darkness. Then Jack, his weight making the rope creak but hold. Finally Raven, descending hand over hand into the unknown. The interior of the bank smelled like paper and gun oil. Moonlight filtered through the barred windows, providing just enough illumination to see by. The vault was exactly where it should be. A massive iron door set into the back wall. And in front of it, sleeping in a chair, was the guard. He was older than he'd looked from outside, maybe 60, with a rifle propped against the wall within reach. His chest rose and fell in the steady rhythm of deep sleep. Jack moved toward him, quiet as death, a length of cloth in his hands ready to gag and bind. But before he could reach the guard, the man's eyes snapped open. For a frozen moment, everyone was perfectly still. The guards staring at three masked intruders. The intruders staring back. Time suspended like that rope still hanging from the skylight. Then the guard lunged for his rifle. Jack was faster. He crossed the distance in 2 steps and drove his fist into the guard's jaw. The man crumpled without a sound, unconscious before he hit the floor. "Tie him up," Raven hissed. Jack pulled out rope, bound the guard's hands and feet, gagged him with the cloth. The man groaned but didn't wake. Clara was already at the vault, tools out, ear pressed against the metal door. Her hands moved with practiced precision, feeling for tumblers, listening for clicks that only she could hear. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Outside, somewhere in the distance, a train whistle sounded. The midnight train, arriving exactly on schedule. Cole's target. Which meant his men would be mobilizing right about now. 20 armed outlaws moving into position to hit a train that wouldn't be carrying what they thought it was. Because the jewels were already here. Already in this vault. Already seconds away from changing hands. Claire's tools clicked faster. She was close. Had to be close. 15 minutes. The train whistle sounded again, closer now. Then, so quiet it was almost inaudible, the vault door's mechanism gave a soft clunk. "Got it," Clara breathed. She pulled the door open, and there they were. 3 wooden crates stacked neatly inside, each marked with customs stamps and shipping labels. Millions of dollars in jewels sitting there like they'd been waiting for exactly this moment. Jack grabbed the first crate. It was heavier than expected, dense with precious stones. Clara took the second. Raven, the third. They moved toward the back door, the exit into the alley where Sam would be waiting. That's when gunfire erupted outside. Not close, but not far either, maybe 3 blocks away, shouting. More shots, the sound of Cole's heist going bad or going right, impossible to tell which. "Move," Raven ordered. They hit the back door and burst into the alley. Sam was there with the wagon, horses already stamping and nervous from the gunfire. "Load up!" The crates went into the wagon bed. Clara climbed up onto the driver's seat next to Sam. Jack jumped into the back with the crates, rifle in hand. Raven was about to follow when a voice called out from the mouth of the alley. "Well, well, look what we have here!" 3 men stepped into view, backlit by the streetlights beyond, all armed, all wearing the kind of hard expressions that came from lives spent doing violence. Cole's men. Had to be. He'd positioned them around town, and these 3 had either heard the commotion or had been watching the bank all along. "Those crates belonged to Mr. Braddock," the lead man said. He was tall, angular, with a deputy's badge that meant nothing, the same man who'd driven the carriage that first night. "You're going to put them down nice and slow." Jack's rifle came up, but Raven grabbed his arm. "Don't. We're outnumbered and outgunned." "Smart," the deputy said. "Now the crates." Raven looked at Clara and Sam on the wagon, at Jack beside her, at the 3 men blocking their escape. Calculated odds that weren't in their favor, then made a decision that would change everything. "No," Raven said. The deputy's expression shifted from confident to confused. "What?" I said no. "These crates are ours. We took them fair. If Cole wants them, he can take them from us." The gunfire in the distance was getting louder, closer. Whatever was happening with the train was escalating. The deputy's hand dropped to his pistol. "Last chance." Raven's hand was already on the revolver beneath the coat. Jack's rifle was still partially raised. 3 against 3, but the element of surprise was gone. "Sam," Raven said quietly, "when I say go, you drive. Don't stop for anything." "But don't stop." Time seemed to slow. Raven could see the deputy's fingers twitching toward his gun, could see Jack's jaw clenched tight, could hear Clara's breathing, fast and shallow. Then, from somewhere behind the 3 men, an explosion shattered the night. Everyone turned toward the sound. A fireball was rising into the sky maybe 5 blocks over, near the train station, screaming. More gunfire. Chaos erupting like a wound opening. In that moment of distraction, Raven drew and fired. The shot took the deputy in the shoulder, spinning him around. Jack's rifle barked twice, dropping the second man. The third got his gun up and fired back, the bullet buzzing past Raven's ear close enough to feel the heat. "Go!" Raven shouted. Sam whipped the reins and the wagon lurched forward. Clara grabbed the seat to keep from falling. Jack fired again, keeping the third man pinned behind a barrel. Raven ran alongside the wagon, grabbed the side rail, pulled up and over as it picked up speed. Behind them, the third man was firing, bullets punching into the wooden siding. One of the horses screamed and stumbled but kept running. They careened out of the alley and onto the main street. The town was in chaos. People running, more explosions, a building on fire near the station. Cole's heist had gone catastrophically wrong, and it was drawing every able-bodied person with a gun toward the disaster, which meant no one was watching a wagon racing out of town in the opposite direction. Sam drove like a man possessed, whipping the horses, taking corners too fast, not caring about anything except distance. They flew past the last buildings of Silver Peak and onto the open road heading south. Behind them, the town burned. Ahead, freedom waited, if they could reach it. The first relay station appeared at dawn, exactly where Sam had said it would be. An abandoned homestead with a corral and water trough, horses already waiting. They'd pushed through the night, stopping only once to check the injured horse and redistribute weight in the wagon. The animal was limping but functional, and Sam had made the call to keep moving rather than lose time. Now, as pink light bled across the eastern horizon, they worked in frantic silence to swap the exhausted team for fresh mounts. Clara held the reins while Sam and Jack handled the harnesses. Raven stood watch, rifle ready, scanning the empty road behind them. No pursuit yet, but that didn't mean it wasn't coming. "How much time do you think we have?" Clara asked, her voice hoarse from dust and fear. "Not enough," Raven said. "Cole's smart. Once he realizes we hit the bank, he'll send riders. Fast ones." "You think his heist failed?" "Those explosions weren't part of any plan. Something went wrong." Raven lowered the rifle. "Which means he's going to be angry, and when Cole gets angry, people die." Sam finished with the last harness and climbed back onto the driver's seat. "We're ready. Next station is 60 miles south. Should reach it by late afternoon if we don't break an axle." They rolled out as the sun broke fully over the hills, painting the desert in shades of gold and copper. The landscape was brutal and beautiful in equal measure, all rock and sand and twisted vegetation that somehow survived without water. The kind of country that killed the unprepared and tested everyone else. 3 hours in, Jack spotted the dust cloud. "Behind us," he said, pointing. "Maybe 5 miles back." "Could be nothing." Raven pulled out the spyglass and focused on the distant smudge. Through the wavering heat, riders became visible. 6 of them, moving fast, pushing their horses harder than was wise in this terrain. "It's not nothing." "Sam, how fast can we go?" "Faster than this, but we'll kill the horses inside of 10 miles. Then we're on foot with 3 crates of jewels and nowhere to hide." "Do it anyway. We need distance." Sam cracked the reins and the wagon surged forward, wheels bouncing over ruts and rocks, the whole frame shuddering with the impact. In the back, Jack braced himself against the crates while Raven held onto the side rail, watching the pursuing dust cloud grow steadily larger. The miles ate away beneath them. The sun climbed higher, turning the wagon bed into an oven, sweat soaked through clothes. The horses were lathering, their sides heaving, but Sam kept pushing them because stopping meant death or capture, and neither was acceptable. By noon, the pursuit had closed to maybe 2 miles, close enough that Raven could see individual riders through the spyglass, close enough to identify one of them. The angular deputy with the shoulder wound from last night, riding at the front with a rifle across his saddle and an expression that promised violence. "They're gaining," Raven said. Jack checked his rifle, then the revolver at his hip. "How do you want to play this?" "We can't outrun them, not with the wagon weighted down. We need to make a stand." "Where?" "There's nothing but open ground for miles." Sam pointed ahead. "There. See that rock formation? Looks like maybe a ravine cutting through. We could ford up there, make them come at us through a narrow approach." It wasn't much, but it was better than dying in the open. Raven nodded. "Do it." They pushed the failing horses for another mile until the formation resolved into something more concrete, a cluster of sandstone pillars surrounding a narrow gap that led into a shallow canyon, defensible, if barely. Sam drove the wagon into the gap and pulled the horses to a stop. Everyone moved fast, understanding without words what needed to happen. Sam unhitched the horses and led them deeper into the canyon where they'd be protected from stray bullets. Clara grabbed one of the crates and hauled it behind the wagon for cover. Jack positioned himself behind a boulder with a clear line of sight back the way they'd come. Raven found a spot elevated slightly above the others, wedged between two rock pillars with enough protection to shoot from without being an easy target. Then they waited. The riders appeared maybe 10 minutes later, 6 shapes materializing out of the heat shimmer like demons conjured from the desert itself. They pulled up about 100 yards out, staying beyond effective rifle range, and sat there studying the situation. The deputy rode forward alone, stopping at 50 yards. His shoulder was wrapped in a blood-stained bandage, and his face was pale from blood loss or pain or both. But his voice carried clear and hard. "That was stupid running like this. You had to know we'd catch you." Raven stood, rifle visible but not aimed. "Seems like we're still uncaught. For now. But you're trapped. We've got 6 guns, fresh horses, and all day to wait you out. You've got what? 4 people in a wagon you can't move without us cutting you down? We've also got 3 crates of jewels worth $1 million. How much is Cole paying you? Couple hundred? 1,000 if you're lucky?" Raven let that sink in. "You could kill us and take the jewels for yourself. Split it 6 ways, you'd each walk away with more money than you'd make in 20 lifetimes." The deputy smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You trying to turn us against Cole?" "I'm pointing out options. Here's the problem with that. Cole pays us regular. He's predictable. You? You're a stranger who just robbed a bank and shot me. Why would I trust you over him?" "Because I'm offering you a fortune and he's offering you a wage." One of the other riders called out something Raven couldn't hear. The deputy turned in his saddle, had a brief conversation, then looked back. "Interesting proposal, but no. See, Cole doesn't just pay us, he protects us. He's got connections, safe houses, ways to move money without it being traced. You've got nothing but 3 crates and hope. So here's my counteroffer. You hand over the jewels, and we let you walk away. You keep your lives, we keep our jobs. Everyone goes home happy. And if we refuse? Then this gets ugly for everyone. Your choice." Raven looked at Clara, who was crouched behind the wagon with her revolver drawn. At Jack, wedged behind his boulder with the rifle ready. At Sam, deeper in the canyon with the horses, probably wishing he'd never agreed to this insane job. "How long can we hold them off?" Raven asked quietly. Jack considered the question with the pragmatism of someone who'd been in gunfights before. "Depends. If they rush us all at once, maybe 5 minutes before we're overwhelmed. If they're smart and take their time, pick us off from distance." He shrugged. "We've got water for maybe a day. They can just wait for the sun to do their work. We're not giving up the jewels." "Didn't figure we were. Just wanted you to know the odds." Raven turned back to the deputy. "No deal. You want the jewels? Come take them." The deputy sighed like this outcome genuinely disappointed him. "Have it your way." He turned and rode back to the others. They dismounted, pulled rifles from saddle scabbards, and began spreading out in a loose semicircle. "Here we go," Jack muttered. The first shot came from the left, kicking up dirt 10 feet in front of the wagon. A ranging shot, testing distance. Jack returned fire, the boom of his rifle echoing off the rock walls. One of the riders dove for cover. Then it was chaos. Bullets whined and ricocheted off stone. Clara fired twice, forcing one attacker to retreat. Sam appeared with a shotgun he'd somehow kept hidden, discharged both barrels in the general direction of the enemy, then ducked back as return fire chewed up the rock where his head had been. Raven aimed carefully, tracked one of the riders as he moved between cover points, and squeezed the trigger. The man went down clutching his leg. Not dead, but out of the fight. 5 against 4 now. Still bad odds, but better. The gunfight settled into a rhythm. The attackers would move, try to get closer, or find a better angle. Raven's crew would drive them back with concentrated fire. Nobody on either side was willing to take the kind of risks that would break the stalemate, which meant it became a war of attrition. An hour passed. 2. The sun climbed to its zenith and began the long descent toward evening. Ammunition started running low. The horses were getting restless, spooked by the constant gunfire. Then one of the attackers did something stupid and brave. He made a run directly at the wagon, firing as he came, trying to close the distance fast enough that he could get behind their cover before they could stop him. He almost made it. Jack's rifle barked. The runner stumbled but kept coming. Clara fired, missed. Raven tracked him, led the target just slightly, and fired. The bullet caught him in the chest. He fell forward, momentum carrying him another few feet before he collapsed face first in the dirt 20 yards from the wagon. The deputy's voice cut through the sudden silence. "You just killed Marcus. He had a wife. 2 kids." Raven felt something cold settle in the chest. "He shouldn't have run at us. You're going to pay for that, all of you." But the deputy's remaining men seemed less enthusiastic now. They'd seen 2 of their number go down, and the promised easy capture was looking more like a bloodbath. Another hour. The shadows grew longer. Raven's ammunition was down to maybe 10 rounds. Jack had less. Clara's revolver was nearly empty. "We can't keep this up," Clara said during a lull in the shooting. "We're almost out of bullets." "I know. So what do we do?" Before Raven could answer, a new sound cut through the desert air. Hoofbeats. Multiple horses, coming fast from the south. Everyone froze, trying to determine if these were reinforcements for the deputy or some other complication. The riders appeared maybe a minute later, and Raven's stomach dropped. Cole Braddock, leading 15 men, all armed to the teeth and looking like they'd ridden straight through hell to get here. The deputy stood and waved. "Boss, we got them pinned down. They killed Marcus and wounded Jenkins, but we—" "Shut up," Cole said, not even looking at him. His eyes were locked on the rocks where Raven was positioned. "Get your men out of here. This isn't your fight anymore." "But boss, we almost—" "I said, get out." The deputy and his remaining men retreated, mounting up and riding back toward Silver Peak, which left Cole and 15 fresh fighters against Raven's exhausted crew with almost no ammunition. Cole dismounted and walked forward, hands visible and empty. "Can we talk?" Raven stepped out from behind the rocks. "Talk? That was one hell of a play last night. Hit the bank while I was busy with the train. Very smart. Almost worked." "Almost." "Yeah, see, the problem with your plan is that you didn't account for my plan going so completely to shit that I'd have to abandon the whole thing." Cole's expression was hard to read in the fading light. "You know what was in that secure car? Nothing. The jewels never came on that train. They'd been rerouted at the last minute because someone tipped off the railroad about a possible robbery." Understanding crashed over Raven like cold water. "Tommy." "Yeah. Tommy Reed, my late clerk who apparently grew a conscience before he died. He sent a telegraph to the railroad, warned them about the heist. So they rerouted the shipment and filled the secure car with guards instead." Cole's voice was flat, emotionless. "We hit the car expecting jewels and found 20 men with rifles waiting for us. Lost 8 of my people before we could retreat. And for what? Nothing. But the jewels were in the bank vault. We saw them. Those were decoys, fake stones in real cases. The railroad knew someone was planning a hit, so they set a trap, and we both walked right into it." Cole looked at the wagon, at the 3 crates visible in the bed. "Except you actually took the bait. You've got 3 crates of worthless glass while the real jewels are probably in San Francisco by now." Raven felt the bottom drop out of everything. All that planning, all that risk, the people who'd died, all for nothing. "I don't believe you," Raven said. "Check for yourself. Crack one open." Jack was already moving, using his rifle butt to pry open the nearest crate. The wood splintered and gave way. He reached inside and pulled out a velvet bag, opened it, and poured the contents into his palm. Stones glittered in the dying light, but even from a distance, Raven could see they didn't have the depth or fire of real gems. They were too perfect, too uniform. Glass and paste, worth maybe a few $100s if you found a buyer stupid enough. "No," Clara breathed. Jack threw the bag down in disgust. "We risked everything for fake rocks." Sam just sat down hard, looking like someone had shot him. Cole walked closer, stopping a few feet from Raven. "So here we are. You've got nothing. I've got nothing. We both lost people over a railroad's paranoia and a dead clerk's guilty conscience." "What do you want?" Raven asked. "Initially, I wanted to kill you, all of you, because this disaster is at least partly your fault. If you hadn't been sniffing around, if Tommy hadn't known about the heist, maybe he wouldn't have sent that telegraph. Cole pulled out a cigar, lit it with a match struck on his thumbnail. But then I got to thinking, you pulled off something I didn't think was possible. You got into that bank, cracked the vault, and got out clean while my entire operation was exploding. That takes skill. Get to the point. The point is, I'm offering you a choice. You and your crew can ride out of here right now. I'll tell my men to stand down and we'll call this whole thing a wash. You go your way, I go mine, and we forget this ever happened. Or you work for me. Really work for me this time. I need people I can trust after losing half my crew last night, and you've proven you can do things I can't. That's valuable. Raven looked at the crew. Clara's face was unreadable. Jack looked like he wanted to shoot something. Sam just looked tired. And if we refuse both options? Raven asked. Cole's expression hardened. Then we have a problem. Because you know too much about my operations, my methods, my people. I can't have you walking around with that knowledge unless I know you're on my side. So it's work for you or die. In essence, yes. The sun was almost down now, the desert turning purple in shadow. Raven's mind raced through options, looking for the angle, the play that would turn this around. But there wasn't one. Not with 15 guns pointed at 4 exhausted people with empty weapons. I need to talk to my crew, Raven said. Take your time. We've got all night. Raven walked back to where the others waited. They gathered in a tight circle, speaking in whispers. What do you think? Raven asked. I think we're screwed, Jack said flatly. We can't fight 15 men. We can't run. We're out of options. Clara shook her head. I didn't sign up to be Cole Braddock's employee. I signed up for one job with a big payout. This isn't that. Neither did I, Sam added. But I also didn't sign up to die in the desert over fake jewels. So what are you saying? I'm saying maybe we take the first option. We walk away, live to fight another day. Raven looked at each of them in turn. These strangers who'd become something like partners over the past few weeks, who'd risked everything based on a plan that had been doomed from the start. I'm sorry, Raven said. This is my fault. I should have known it was too good to be true. We all made the choice, Clara said. We're all responsible. Jack spat into the dirt. So what's it gonna be, boss? We taking Cole's offer? Before Raven could answer, gunfire erupted from the rocks above. Not from Cole's men, from somewhere else. High up, where no one should have been. 2 of Cole's men went down immediately. The others scattered, diving for cover, returning fire at an enemy they couldn't see. Cole threw himself behind a boulder, shouting orders. Spread out! Find them! Keep them pinned! More shots. Another man fell. Then another. Raven grabbed the rifle and took cover with the crew behind the wagon. Who the hell is that? No idea, Jack said. But they're saving our asses. The ambush was surgical. Whoever was up in those rocks, they were professionals. Every shot counted. Every movement was calculated. In less than 3 minutes, Cole had lost 6 men and the rest were completely pinned down. Then a voice called out from above. Female. Strong. Familiar somehow, though Raven couldn't place it. Cole Braddock, this is Sheriff Ann Morrison from Red Valley County. You're under arrest for murder, robbery, and conspiracy. Tell your men to throw down their weapons. Cole laughed, wild and slightly unhinged. You're bluffing. There's no law out here. There is now. I've got 20 deputies and federal marshals surrounding this position. You're done. And then Raven saw them. Figures moving along the ridgeline. Not 20, but maybe a dozen. All carrying rifles. All positioned perfectly to slaughter anyone who tried to run. Cole saw them too. His expression went from defiant to calculating. He was weighing odds again, looking for the play. Your choice, Braddock, the sheriff called. Surrender or die. For a long moment, Cole just sat there behind his boulder, probably running through every possible escape scenario and finding them all wanting. Finally, he stood, hands raised. We surrender. His men followed suit, one by one, dropping weapons and stepping into the open. The law descended from the rocks like an avenging force. They were professionals, territorial marshals by their badges, the kind of lawmen who actually knew what they were doing. They separated Cole's men, bound their hands, confiscated weapons with practiced efficiency. The sheriff approached Raven's position. She was maybe 40, with iron gray hair pulled back severe, and eyes that had seen enough darkness to not be shocked by anything. You the crew that hit the bank in Silver Peak? She asked. Yes, Raven said, seeing no point in lying. You know those jewels were fake, right? We figured that out. Good. Saves me the explanation. She looked at the wagon, at the broken crate spilling worthless stones. Here's how this is going to work. You're under arrest for bank robbery, but given that you didn't actually steal anything of value, and given that you're going to testify against Cole Braddock and his operation, I'm prepared to offer you a deal. What kind of deal? Testify. Tell us everything you know about Braddock's organization, and in exchange, we'll reduce the charges. Maybe probation, maybe time served. Depends on how cooperative you are. Clara stepped forward. And if we don't testify? Then you hang alongside Cole for murder. That guard you knocked unconscious in the bank? He's dead. Hit his head when he fell. That makes it a capital crime. The world tilted sickeningly. Raven thought back to that moment, Jack hitting the guard, the man crumpling. No one had checked if he was breathing. They'd just tied him up and kept moving. He was alive when we left him, Raven said. Maybe. But he's dead now. And somebody has to answer for that. Jack's voice was quiet. I hit him. That was me. I don't care who threw the punch. You're all equally guilty under the law. So, do we have a deal? Raven looked at the crew. At Cole being led away in chains, still somehow smiling like this was all part of some larger plan. At the desert stretching endlessly in every direction. They'd come so far, risked so much, lost everything, and now the only choice left was between betrayal and death. We'll testify, Raven said. The sheriff nodded. Smart choice. Get your things. We're riding back to Silver Peak tonight. As the marshals began organizing the prisoners for transport, Clara moved close to Raven. What happens now? She asked. We survive. Again. Whatever that takes. And after? I don't know. They were loaded into wagons, separated from Cole's men, but still prisoners all the same. The ride back to Silver Peak took most of the night. Nobody spoke. There was nothing left to say. The town looked different from inside a marshal's custody. The bank they'd robbed was dark and locked. The streets were quiet. Everything felt surreal, like a dream that had turned into a nightmare without transition. They were taken to a makeshift jail, locked in cells, given water and stale bread. Through the barred window, Raven could see the eastern sky beginning to lighten with approaching dawn. Somewhere in another cell, Cole was probably planning his escape, or his defense, or his revenge. That's what survivors did. They adapted. They found the angle. Raven lay back on the hard cot and stared at the ceiling. The woman no one could read had gambled everything and lost, but somehow, impossibly, was still alive. And where there was life, there was always one more play. The play revealed itself 3 days into captivity. Sheriff Morrison came to Raven's cell alone, late at night when the other prisoners were sleeping. She carried a lantern in one hand and a folder of papers in the other, and her expression was harder than the iron bars separating them. We have a problem, she said without preamble. Raven sat up on the cot. What kind of problem? Cole Braddock escaped 2 hours ago, killed a guard, took his keys, and walked out the back door like he owned the place. Morrison set the lantern down, its light throwing harsh shadows across her weathered face. We found the guard's body in a supply closet, throat cut, clean, professional. The news should have been shocking, but somehow it wasn't. Cole was exactly the kind of man who could turn captivity into opportunity. How many went with him? Just him. Left his men behind without a second thought. That tell you something about his loyalty? Morrison opened the folder. But here's the interesting part. Before he left, he stopped by the evidence room. Took something that doesn't make sense. What? Your personal effects. The contents of your saddlebag. Money, mostly. $22,000 in gold and currency that we'd confiscated when we arrested you. She looked up. Why would Cole Braddock care about your money? Raven's mind raced. The money represented everything won over those weeks in Bitter Creek and beyond. Every card game, every calculated risk. It was supposed to be the foundation for something new, something beyond this life. I don't know, Raven said. Morrison's eyes narrowed. I think you're lying. I think Cole took that money because it matters to you. Because he knows the one thing that might make you do something stupid is trying to get it back. That's a lot of assumptions. Is it? Because here's what I know about you, Hale. Morrison sat down on the bench outside the cell. You're smart. Probably the smartest criminal I've dealt with in 20 years of wearing this badge. You planned a bank heist that would have worked if the railroad hadn't played their own game. That takes intelligence and nerve. Your point? My point is that you're wasted in a jail cell, and Cole Braddock is too dangerous to leave running around free. Morrison leaned forward. So I'm going to make you an offer. A different kind of deal than the one I proposed before. I'm listening. You help me catch Cole. You use that smart brain of yours to figure out where he went and what he's planning. You bring him in, alive if possible, dead if necessary. And in exchange, I make your legal problems disappear. Just like that? Not just like that. You'd be working for me, officially deputized as a territorial marshal with all the authority that entails. It's not unprecedented. We've used former outlaws before when their skills were needed. Raven studied the sheriff's face, looking for the trap. And my crew? Same deal applies to them if they cooperate. But you're the one I need. The others are followers. You're the leader. What makes you think I can find Cole when you can't? Morrison smiled without humor. Because you think like him. You're cut from the same cloth, even if you don't want to admit it. Both of you are survivors who learned to play the game better than anyone else. The difference is you haven't completely lost your humanity yet. The words struck closer than Raven wanted to acknowledge. The comparison to Cole, the suggestion that they were fundamentally similar, that given enough time and enough hard choices, Raven could become exactly what he was. If I agree, Raven said slowly, I do this my way. No interference, no second-guessing my methods. Within reason. No, not within reason. My way, or get someone else. They stared at each other across the bars, Morrison calculating how much leash to give, Raven calculating how much freedom to demand. Finally, Morrison stood. Your way. But if you cross me, if you run, I'll hunt you to the end of the earth and put a bullet in you myself. Clear? Clear. Morrison unlocked the cell. Get your things. We leave at dawn. The crew took the news differently. Claire was pragmatic about it, seeing the opportunity for what it was, a chance to avoid hanging. Jack seemed almost relieved to have a clear enemy to point his violence toward. Sam just wanted to go home to his sister, and if helping catch Cole Braddock was the price, he'd pay it. They gathered in the sheriff's office while Morrison laid out what they knew. Cole had taken a horse and supplies but left no clear trail. He'd headed south initially, but that could be misdirection. He had contacts throughout the territory, safe houses, people who owed him favors or feared him enough to help. The question, Morrison said, is where does a man like Cole go when everything falls apart? Raven looked at the map spread across the desk, marked with known locations of Cole's operations. The pattern was there if you knew how to see it. Every safe house, every cache, every contact, they all radiated out from a central point. Here, Raven said, tapping a spot on the map maybe 80 miles south of Silver Peak. This is where he's going, Morrison frowned. That's nothing. Empty desert. There's not even a town marked there. Exactly. Cole doesn't run to civilization when he's in trouble. He runs to places where nobody thinks to look. Raven traced a finger across the map. Every operation he's run, every job he's pulled, they all use this area as a fallback point. There must be something there. A camp, a canyon, somewhere he can regroup. That's a lot of territory to search based on a hunch. It's not a hunch. It's pattern recognition. Cole is predictable if you understand his logic. Clara leaned over the map. Even if you're right, what's the plan? We ride out there, find his hideout, and then what? Ask him politely to come back? We don't ask, Raven said. We take. Morrison shook her head. He's got your money. He's expecting you to come after it. This could be a trap. It is a trap, but we're walking into it anyway because Cole made a mistake. What mistake? He thinks I care about the money enough to be reckless. He thinks I'll come charging in angry and stupid, and he'll be waiting to kill me. Raven met Morrison's eyes. But I don't care about the money. I care about proving something. Proving what? That he was wrong about me, about what I'm capable of, about who wins when we're playing the same game. They left before dawn with fresh horses and enough supplies for a week. Morrison assigned 2 of her deputies to accompany them, hard men who'd been lawmen long enough to know when to shoot and when to wait. The group rode south through country that got progressively more desolate, following a trail that existed mostly in Raven's mind. 2 days in, they found the first sign, an abandoned campfire, maybe 12 hours cold. Single rider, based on the tracks. Horse prints matched the description of the animal Cole had stolen. "We're close," Raven said. They followed the trail into a region of twisted rock formations and narrow canyons, the kind of place where an ambush could come from anywhere, where every shadow could hide a rifle barrel. Jack rode with his weapon ready, eyes constantly scanning. Claire had gone quiet, the way she did before violence. Sam just looked tired, like he'd aged 10 years in the past week. The canyon opened into a wider space, and there it was. A small camp tucked into an alcove, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. A tent. A fire ring. Horses tethered to a scrub tree. And sitting on a rock near the fire, cleaning a rifle with methodical care, was Cole Braddock. He looked up as they approached, and his expression was almost pleased. "Wondered how long it would take you to find me." Morrison and her deputies fanned out, weapons drawn. "Cole Braddock, you're under arrest." Cole ignored her, focusing on Raven. "You came for the money." "I came to finish what we started." "Which was what exactly? You think this was ever about the jewels? About one job?" Cole set down the rifle carefully. "This was always about something bigger, about whether you had what it takes to survive in my world." "I don't want your world." "Liar. You want exactly what I have. Power, freedom, the ability to take what you want without asking permission." He stood slowly, hands visible. "The only difference between us is that I'm honest about it." Raven dismounted, handed the reins to Sam. "You're wrong. The difference between us is that you think power comes from making people afraid. I think it comes from making better choices." Cole laughed. "Better choices? Is that what you call it? You robbed a bank, killed a guard, ran from the law? Those are better choices?" "The guard's death was an accident. Everything else was calculated risk. There's a difference." "Not to the people who died." Morrison stepped forward. "Enough talk. Cole, you're coming back to stand trial." Cole's eyes never left Raven's. "And if I don't want to?" "Then you die here. Your choice." For a long moment, nobody moved. The desert wind whistled through the rocks. The horses shifted nervously, sensing tension. Then Cole did something unexpected. He reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch, threw it to Raven. The pouch landed at Raven's feet with the distinctive clink of gold coins. "Your money," Cole said. "All of it. I didn't spend $1." Raven picked up the pouch, felt its weight. "Why?" "Because I wanted to see if you'd come, if you'd risk everything one more time." "And you did." Cole smiled. "That's what I admire about you, Hale. You're willing to bet it all even when the odds are terrible. That's not admiration. That's recognizing a weakness." "Maybe. Or maybe it's recognizing a kindred spirit." Cole looked at Morrison, at her deputies with their rifles trained on him. "I'll make you the same deal I made Hale. Let me go and I'll tell you where to find the real jewels." Morrison's eyebrows rose. "The real jewels were shipped to San Francisco." "Were they? Or did I tell you that to see if you'd believe it?" Cole's smile widened. "The railroad did reroute them, but not to San Francisco, to a private buyer in El Paso. I've got contacts there, people who owe me favors. I know exactly where those stones are and exactly how to get them." "You're lying." "Am I? Test me. Let me walk out of here and in 1 month I'll deliver those jewels to you. Real stones, worth every penny of that $1 million. You'll be a hero. The sheriff who recovered what every other lawman in 3 territories couldn't find. And what do you get out of it? Freedom, a clean slate. I disappear, you never see me again, and everyone wins." Morrison shook her head. "No deal. You murdered a guard in my jail. You're going back to face justice." Cole shrugged. "Then I guess those jewels stay lost forever." He was good, Raven had to admit. Even cornered and outgunned, he was still playing angles, still looking for the leverage that would turn everything around. But there was something off about this offer, something that didn't fit the pattern. "He's lying," Raven said. Cole's expression didn't change. What makes you say that? Because you don't make deals when you're losing. You fight or you run, but you don't negotiate. Which means this is a distraction. Raven looked at the camp, at the horses, at the way Cole was positioned. There's someone else here. Someone in the rocks with a rifle pointed at us right now. Cole's smile faltered just slightly. Everyone down, Raven shouted. The shot came from the ridge above, exactly where Raven had guessed. The bullet passed through the space where Morrison's head had been a second before she dropped. Then it was chaos. The deputies returned fire. Clara and Jack scattered for cover. Sam dove behind the horses. Raven drew and fired at Cole, but he was already moving, rolling behind the rocks with the trained reflexes of someone who'd been in 100 gunfights. A second shooter opened up from the opposite ridge. Crossfire. Classic ambush setup. One of Morrison's deputies went down with a bullet in the shoulder. The other was pinned behind an outcropping, unable to return effective fire. Raven found cover behind a boulder and tried to locate the shooters. There. A muzzle flash from the left ridge, and another from the right. Two men, well positioned, with clear lines of fire over most of the canyon floor. Cole had planned this perfectly. Let them find him. Let them think they had him cornered, then spring the trap. We need to get out of here, Clara shouted from behind the wagon. But there was no way out. The canyon entrance was covered by the shooters. Any attempt to retreat would put them in the open. They were going to die here. Unless... Raven looked at the cliff face above the left side shooter. It was steep, but climbable if you were desperate enough. And there was a narrow ledge that ran behind where the shooter was positioned. Jack! Raven shouted. Can you keep them suppressed? For how long? 2 minutes. I can try. Jack opened up with sustained fire, forcing both shooters to keep their heads down. It wouldn't last long. He'd burn through ammunition fast at that rate. But it might be enough. Raven ran for the cliff face. Bullets kicked up dirt, but Jack's covering fire was working. The shooters couldn't aim properly while pinned down. The climb was brutal. Sharp rocks tore at hands, footholds crumbled, but Raven kept moving, driven by the knowledge that stopping meant death for everyone below. 30 seconds. The ledge was just ahead. The shooting below intensified. Jack was running out of bullets. 45 seconds. Hands closed on the ledge, pulled up and over. The shooter was 15 feet away, focused on the canyon below. He hadn't heard the approach over the gunfire. Raven drew the revolver, took careful aim, and fired. The bullet caught him in the back. He dropped without a sound. One down. The second shooter realized what had happened and swung his rifle toward the ledge. Raven dove flat as bullets chewed up rock where a head had been. Then Morrison's remaining deputy got a clean shot and took him down. Silence fell over the canyon, broken only by the ringing in everyone's ears. Raven scrambled back down the cliff. Morrison was already on her feet, checking her wounded deputy. Clara and Jack were emerging from cover. Sam was calming the horses. And Cole was gone. His rifle was still by the rock where he'd left it. His pack was still in the tent, but the man himself had vanished like smoke. Damn it! Morrison kicked the rock. He slipped away during the firefight. Raven walked to where Cole had been sitting and found something carved into the stone with a knife point. Fresh scratches, done quickly. It was a message. Well played. See you around. CB. Morrison read it over Raven's shoulder and swore again. He's too smart for his own good. No, Raven said quietly. He's exactly as smart as he needs to be, and that's what makes him dangerous. They searched the area but found no trail. Cole had disappeared into the desert like a ghost, probably having scouted a dozen escape routes before they ever arrived. The wounded deputy needed medical attention. They couldn't stay here hunting a phantom while he bled out. The decision made itself. They rode back to Silver Peak slowly, arriving 4 days later. The deputy survived, though he'd carry a limp for the rest of his life. The town had recovered from the chaos of Cole's failed heist, though people still talked about it in whispers. Morrison called Raven into her office the day after they returned. Cole's gone, she said without preamble. Disappeared completely. My contacts in Mexico say he crossed the border 3 days ago, heading south into territory where we don't have jurisdiction. He's not coming back, Raven said. How do you know? Because he proved his point. He wanted to see if I'd come after him, and I did. He wanted to show that he could escape any trap, and he did. There's nothing left for him here. Morrison leaned back in her chair. So what happens now? Now you keep your end of the deal. You let us go. Just like that? After everything? You said if I helped you catch Cole, you'd make our legal problems disappear. We tried. He got away. But we tried. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, studying Raven with those hard eyes that had seen too much. You're right, she finally said. A deal's a deal. She pulled out papers from her desk, signed them with quick strokes. You and your crew are free to go. Charges dropped due to cooperation with territorial authorities. It's all documented and legal. Raven took the papers, read them carefully. Everything was there, clean slates for all of them. What will you do now? Morrison asked. I don't know, something different. You could stay on as a marshal, the offer's still open. We could use someone with your skills. No, I'm done with that life. All of it. Morrison nodded slowly. I understand. But Hale, if you ever change your mind, the door's open. Raven walked out of that office and into the street where the others were waiting. Clara, Jack, Sam, all holding their own release papers, all looking like they couldn't quite believe they were free. What now? Clara asked. Now we split up, Raven said. Go our separate ways. Build new lives away from all this. What about the money Cole gave back? Raven looked at the leather pouch, heavy with gold coins that had been won through cards and skill and calculated risks. $22,000. Enough to start over. Enough to build something real. We split it, $5,000 each, with the remainder going to Sam for his sister's medicine. Sam's eyes went wide. That's too much. I don't need... Yes, you do. Take it. Get your sister what she needs. They divided the money there in the street, each taking their share. Then Clara and Jack headed east, planning to catch a train to somewhere neither of them had been. Sam went west, toward home, and a sister who might actually survive now. And Raven stood alone in that dusty street, watching them go. The sun was setting over Silver Peak, painting everything in shades of gold. The same light that had illuminated 1,000 poker games, 100 gunfights, countless moments of decision where one choice led to survival and another to death. A voice spoke from behind. Quite a journey you've been on. Raven turned to find Morrison leaning against a post, arms crossed. It's not over yet, Raven said. No? Where does the woman no one can read go from here? Somewhere new. Somewhere people don't know the name Raven Hale or what it means. And Eliza Vance? Does she get a fresh start too? Raven stiffened. How did you... I'm a sheriff. It's my job to know things. Morrison pushed off from the post. There's a bounty on Eliza Vance. Old warrant out of St. Louis. Something about a wealthy guardian who ended up dead and his ward who disappeared. That was self-defense. I believe you, but the law doesn't care about what I believe. It cares about evidence and testimony. Morrison pulled out another paper, which is why I'm giving you this. Raven took it, read it twice to make sure it was real. A death certificate for Eliza Vance, died of influenza 6 years ago in a town called Redemption, signed by a doctor, witnessed by a judge, completely official. How? Raven managed. I know people. People who owe me favors. People who understand that sometimes the law needs to bend a little to serve justice. Morrison smiled slightly. Eliza Vance is dead. She has been for years. The woman standing in front of me is Raven Hale. And Raven Hale helped me, so I helped her back. Why? Because I've been doing this job long enough to know the difference between someone who's genuinely evil and someone who's just trying to survive in a world that gave them no good options. You're the second kind. And people like that deserve a second chance. Raven looked at the paper again, at the name Eliza Vance written in elegant script next to the word deceased. The past, officially buried. The ghost finally laid to rest. Thank you, Raven said quietly. Don't thank me. Just do something good with this chance. Be someone better than what this territory tried to make you. Morrison walked away, disappearing into the gathering darkness. Raven stood there holding that certificate, feeling something that might have been hope or might have been relief. It was hard to tell the difference anymore. That night, Raven slept in the boarding house one last time. In the morning, packed up everything that mattered, which wasn't much. A change of clothes, the remaining money, the release papers, and the death certificate. And one other thing. The hat that had been worn in 100 poker games. The coat that had protected against desert cold and suspicious eyes. The binding that had helped create a different person. Raven left them on the bed, relics of a life that was ending. The horse was waiting at the livery. The same dun mare that had carried Raven to Silver Peak weeks ago. Steady, reliable, asking no questions. The ride south took 3 days. Through desert and scrubland, past mining camps and ghost towns, following a route that led toward the border, but never quite reaching it. On the 4th day, Raven arrived in a town that barely qualified as such. Maybe 20 buildings clustered around a crossroads. No law, no telegraph, no railroad. Just people living quiet lives away from everywhere that mattered. The kind of place where you could disappear if you wanted to. The proprietor of the general store was an older woman with kind eyes. "You new to town?" "Just arrived, looking for a place to stay." "We've got a boarding house, not fancy, but clean. You planning to stay long?" Raven looked at the quiet street, at the ordinary people going about ordinary lives, at the possibility of something different. "Maybe," Raven said. "We'll see." That night, in a small room above a bakery that filled the air with the smell of fresh bread, Raven sat by the window and watched stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, Cole Braddock was building a new empire, or drinking himself to death, or plotting revenge. It didn't matter. That game was over. Somewhere else, Claire was probably running a new con. Jack was finding new things to blow up. Sam was buying medicine for his sister and maybe finding peace. And here, in this nowhere town, Raven Hale was dying as quietly as Eliza Vance had died. What would rise in their place was still unclear. Some new identity, some new life. Or maybe just a person learning to exist without constantly calculating odds and reading tells and looking for the angle that would turn survival into victory. The binding came off for the last time. The masculine clothing was folded away. In the cracked mirror, a woman's face looked back, not young, not old, just marked by years of hard living and harder choices. Hair that had been cut short for disguise began to grow. Posture that had been rigid and controlled began to soften. Voice that had been kept low and rough found its natural register. It was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. Weeks passed. Raven, or whoever she was becoming, found work keeping books for the general store. The math that had made card counting second nature translated well to ledgers and inventory. The proprietor never asked about the past. Neither did anyone else. It was almost boring, almost normal. And slowly, impossibly, it started to feel like home. 2 months after arriving, Raven was working in the store when a rider came through town. Tall, dusty from travel, with the look of someone who'd been riding hard for days. The rider stopped at the water trough, let the horse drink, then walked into the store. It was Cole. He looked different, thinner, harder. Like the desert had worn away everything soft and left only essentials. Their eyes met across the store, and for a frozen moment the past crashed into the present with almost physical force. Then Cole smiled. That same confident smile from the poker table in Bitter Creek a lifetime ago. "Hale," he said. "Or should I call you something else now? What are you doing here?" "Passing through. Saw the horse outside and recognized it. Figured I'd see if you were still as good at reading people as you used to be." "I'm done with that life." "Are you?" Cole picked up a can of beans from a shelf, examined it like it was the most interesting thing in the world. "Because it looks to me like you're hiding, and hiding is just another kind of running. What do you want, Cole?" He set down the beans and looked at her directly. "I came to say I was wrong. Back in that canyon, in Silver Peak, all of it. I thought we were the same. I thought you'd become what I am given enough time and pressure. But you didn't." "No, I didn't. You found a third option. Not power through fear, not surrender, something else." He walked toward the door, then paused. "That takes more courage than anything I've ever done." "Where are you going?" "Somewhere else, somewhere I haven't been. Figured I'd try that third option myself. See if an old dog can learn new tricks." "Will it work?" Cole shrugged. "Don't know, but it's worth finding out." He walked out, mounted his horse, and rode south without looking back. Raven watched from the doorway until he disappeared into the heat shimmer. Two survivors who'd crossed paths, changed each other in ways neither fully understood, and then separated to find their own answers to questions that had no easy solutions. The proprietor came over, stood beside Raven. "Friend of yours?" "Once, maybe. It's complicated." "Most important things are." Raven went back to the ledgers, to the ordinary work of an ordinary life. But something had shifted. Cole's visit had been a reminder that the past never completely disappeared. It just changed shape, became part of the foundation for whatever came next. That evening, Raven walked to the edge of town and looked out at the desert. The same desert that had witnessed so much violence and desperation and hard choices. The same desert that had been both enemy and refuge. Out there, legends were still being born. Outlaws still ran from the law. Gamblers still played cards in smoky saloons. The frontier was still wild and dangerous and unforgiving. But here, in this quiet town, there was something different. Not safety. Nowhere was truly safe. But the possibility of building something that mattered beyond survival. Raven turned away from the desert and walked back toward the lights of town. Toward the bakery with its smell of fresh bread. Toward the boarding house with its creaky stairs. Toward ordinary people living ordinary lives. And for the first time in memory, that didn't feel like giving up. It felt like winning. The woman no one could read had finally learned to read herself, had looked at all the cards life had dealt and chosen to play a different hand. Not the one that led to power or wealth or reputation, the one that led to peace. Legends don't end, they evolve. And sometimes, in evolving, they become something better than what they were. Raven Hale rode into Bitter Creek a stranger and left Silver Peak a ghost. What remained was simply a person, scarred, changed, but free in ways that mattered more than any heist or any game. The desert wind blew through the quiet streets. Stars appeared overhead in familiar patterns. And in a small room above a bakery, a woman slept without nightmares for the first time in years. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new choices, new opportunities to prove that survival wasn't about winning. It was about choosing who you became when everything else was taken from you. And that choice, made consciously and deliberately, was the only victory that ever really mattered.